Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. One of the things I've learned over the years is that most of us encounter herbs at the very end of their story. We buy a bag of rosemary, a bottle of essential oil, a tincture, or incense blend. But maybe we know the magical correspondences. Maybe we've heard about the medicinal benefits, but we rarely stop to ask how any of it got there. How does a living plant become a medicine, a hydrosol, an essential oil, an incense, a ritual object? What gets lost and what gets gained at every step of that journey? Today's guest is someone who doesn't just study herbs from books. She grows them, harvests them, distills them, works them clinically, studies their chemistry, explores their folklore, and asks how all these perspectives come together in a single practice. That is one of the reasons I looked forward to this conversation, because I want to go beyond simply asking what herbs are used for. I want to understand the craft itself. What does it actually take to become a modern ritual herbalist? How do you decide the exact moment a plant is ready to harvest? Why choose a hydrosol instead of a tincture, a steam distillation instead of another extraction method? What happens chemically inside the still? Does changing the way we prepare a plant also change its medicinal properties, its aromatic profile, or even the way we experience it in ritual? We are going to talk about ritual, magic, psychology, chemistry, herbal medicine, and sacred plants. But more than anything, I want to pull back the curtain on the work itself to understand not just what you make, but how you make it and why those choices matter. And before I introduce Ash and Daniel, I'm going to introduce the other people joining me. We got the loon, Judith. What is going on, Judith? How are you?
Fine, thank you for having me. I can't wait to talk about this topic. It's one of my favorite ones. Everyone else, you can find me on YouTube, Spreaker, and X as the Loon. Check out my interview with Nick and any upcoming weekly brunches.
Thank you very much for coming on, Judith. I appreciate it. I know you're big into this stuff, so it should be fun.
Yes.
Okay. And Sky, thank you so much for coming on, man. That was really awesome that you offered to come on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it for Ash or Daniel. Daniel's one of my favorite spagyricists out there, and I've heard nothing but wonderful things about Ash. So really excited. People can find me at Philosophical Mind Podcast or Therica Podcast. So you could Instagram, RSS feed, all that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. And Ash and Daniel, I know, unfortunately, when I made the intro before, I left Daniel out because I don't think he was, I didn't know you were coming on at that point. But I would have thrown something in there for you. But please introduce yourselves and let everybody know what your deal is also, sir.
Cool. So I'm Daniel Wiseman, and I'm the founder of Secret Fire Spagyria. We are a spagyric apothecary. I'm also the founder of Lumina Institute, which is an educational platform and research platform advancing modern day spagyria and alchemical practices. You can find me on Instagram at Secret Fire Spagyria or Lumina Alchemy, as well as my personal alchemical page, Alchemia Arcadia.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And Ash.
Hi, I'm Ash. I am the owner, founder, operator of Ritual Botanica. I started this around 2014, but I had a lot of incarnations of different herb medicine, probably since I was about 20. So it's been 20 years now I've been working with plants. And I'm located in Asheville, North Carolina. And I love all plant medicine, but I specifically have moved into aromatic medicine. And distillation is kind of my niche. So I've been teaching aromatic distillation of plants since about 2016. And I just love introducing people to this medicine that I feel like in the herbal world is still like highly undervalued. So I'm here to talk about it. And I made Daniel, who's in town visiting from Nova Scotia, jump on here with me. And I'm excited to see what we get into. Thank y'all for having us.
No, of course. Thank you. I'm glad it worked out, because originally I was supposed to have both of you on the first time I tried to schedule it. So, I mean, it worked out anyway.
Yeah.
Is your shop in Asheville?
Yeah, I'm just it's technically Woodfin, but it is 5 minutes from downtown Asheville. And I've kind of bounced around this area. I live just 30 minutes north in the mountains, and I've worked in Marshall. And recently, or about maybe 5 years ago, I moved closer to town. So just out the front door, I can see the French Broad River and the train tracks. It just feels like I'm in a little magical niche, not quite in the main area of Asheville. It's a little quieter here. So, and the shop was open to the public, but the last couple months I've moved back into just by appointment only, and mainly running classes in an online shop.
Gotcha. Yeah, I totally forgot you were out there because I think it was like a week or two after Ike did his thing. I ended up going out to Asheville. I totally would have, if you were open or whatever there, I would have stopped by. I totally forgot.
Yeah, you got to come visit. We'll
Yeah,
just
yeah.
over here by the river, stare at the geese that are out there.
Works for me. I'll be stoned.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Nice. Yeah. So what got you? I guess this is for both of you. What got you into this?
Oh, it's been such a long journey, but I found herbal medicine when I was younger, just looking for some kind of sovereignty within my own wellness and healthcare. I also grew up as like a dirt punk anarchist, so being able to like medicine of the people it was important to me. And for probably the first 10 years, I was very much an herbalist that was like, the medicine tastes bad, it's more potent, let's do it this way. And I did a lot of clinical work. I've always been very hands-on. I spent years farming, so part of my work is focused on actually growing, harvesting, and making fresh plant medicine. And somewhere along the way, I just had this kind of epiphany with a marigold plant that led me into distillation and working with aromatics. And as I've gone further down the aromatic road, it's just completely changed my practice. It's changed my views of healing, of medicine, and I've sunk into a much more sensual and imaginal and ritual place with it. So in 2014, that's when I shifted my shop to be called Ritual Botanica, which to me kind of stood for the fact that everything is made with intention and everything is taken with intention. And the goal of the shop in the beginning was to kind of weave plants back into people's lives so that they'll want to kind of start participating in the more than human world and taking care of the more than human world, and even just going out and watching a sunset and having those moments of beauty. Because I feel like if we don't cultivate these moments of beauty, then we aren't cultivating like hope and just something greater that ties us back into the connection and the web of life. So I don't know. Did that answer the question? I'll pass it to Daniel.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
How did you get started?
Good question. I would say kind of my gateway drug to herbal medicine and alchemy really was actually cannabis. When I was much younger, I was working with some projects that help people gain access to free cannabis, people who had like chronic health issues, like cancer and chronic pain and things like that. I was pretty young at the time, so I was really just interested in growing cannabis. But at that time, like I just saw tremendous healing in people that I did not anticipate when first getting into it, hearing people's stories about how they changed their lives with this plant. And that really turned me on to, of course, the idea that, well, if this plant can heal, all of the plants must have certain potentials. So I started really diving into that, diving into psychedelic plants and mushrooms in general, like looking at the way we can heal ourselves, on a more subtle level, like reading into traditional use of psychoactive substances. And at the same time, I kind of had like an academic interest in the occult in general. And as a part of that, a key part of that interest was in alchemy. Although at that point, again, it was quite academic, kind of armchair. And as time went on, I really felt like, this is what I wanted to make of my life was working with plant medicine. And so when I dove into starting to study that, at the same time I was studying alchemy. So I kind of found this realm within spagyrics and alchemy, where all of my interests kind of converge, where, you know, you have the psychological, psycho-spiritual internal aspects of alchemy and plant medicine in general, and then the practice of plant medicine, you know, growing plants, harvesting plants, making medicines from plants, seeing people, helping people, introduce plants into their life through clinical practice. So that's how kind of all spun together for me. And at this point now, I've moved on to specializing really much more in medicine making and harvesting than the actual clinical practice. I practiced clinically for just over 10 years, and I'm moving more into just focusing on preparing medicine and teaching and researching in regards to alchemy and spagyrics.
That's wild. But either one of you's like into alchemy at all before you got into it? Like the idea of like kind of like a, you know, alchemist of the occult? Or did you just find yourself becoming an alchemist one day in your own way? You know?
You know, it's hard. I mean, for me, alchemy is really like an orientation to her life. Like that's how it's become. It's a way of relating, right? And I started taking alchemy classes before I even really got into distilling and aromatics. And at the same time, I was already into astrology, which is a wing of like you have to have astrology if you're going to be doing alchemy. I was also into occult, and what do they call them now? A psychonaut? Like I think I was doing that before I even knew what the word was. So I was exploring all different realms. And once I really started studying alchemy, and then practicing alchemy, it was like this moment of realizing kind of what Daniel said, where they all converged and it just became one thing. It's hard though when people ask you like what you do, because alchemy has just become this word that is just like, oh, alchemy is just transformation. Like, you know, it's used all over the place now. So to tell people like, oh, I participate in alchemy, and then you start describing all the things alchemy encompasses, you leave people a little brain fucked. They're like, what? You're like eclectic. What is going on? What do you actually do? So it's nice to get on podcast and teach classes and be able to kind of get more clarity around that. Awesome. But yeah, so I guess I was into alchemy before I even knew what alchemy was. Like I do a lot of medical astrology, and naive baby me thought I was making this up. I was like, oh, this makes sense. We'll use astrology as a constitution system. And I started working with it. And then pretty shortly after, someone was like, this already exists. It's called medical astrology. And then I just like went deep down the medical astrology hole.
That's funny. You're like, oh, I just figured out something.
Yeah.
I was thinking that myself too. I'm like, I can't be the first person to think of this. Yeah. You know, I'm real big into, I always bring them up whenever we bring up like astrology and herbalism. Somebody I was really impressed with, and when it came to medicine, I think it's actually kind of, you know, impressive that they kept some of their medicine was still in medicine books up until like the late 1890s or maybe 1900s. Tycho Brahe. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Yeah, he was somebody, God, he had his own observatories. And Kepler, basically, after he died, Kepler jacked his shit and stole it. And he was also working for Tycho. But yeah, he was huge into the stars. He had observatories. He had made a whole bunch of different type of like instruments of able to look at the stars, ways of looking at the stars without a telescope. The telescope wasn't out yet. And he was like, you know, really big into astrology, and he was totally in charge. He had the Isle of Ven, and he was totally in charge of taking care of everybody's health. And he even had he would have stuff planted in planetary like uniform, like all the Saturn, everything would be here. Everything from Jupiter would be here. And it was like built around the observatory, and he turned them into tinctures, and he treated people. And he had stuff in I think it was like in the Danish or Denmark, like pharmacy book up until like the late 1800s, almost 1900s.
Yeah, I'll have to check.
So like, I mean, that shit works, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, if you sit with the plants long enough and start observing the sky, you really see it kind of unfold right before you.
Yeah. Did any of you have any questions, Sky or Judith?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, what exactly constitutes aromatic medicine? I would assume, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with like aromatherapy, incense. I'm just thinking aromatics, but maybe it's a lot more. So
yeah. You know, what's funny is I don't consider myself an aromatherapist at all. I haven't really had aromatherapy training. I don't work with essential oils internally too much, or I don't know. I just, in aromatherapy, I see this disconnect, and it's not true across the board. I'm making a generalization, but I feel there's a disconnect of relating to the plant as its own entity, and therefore the plants get a little bit more abused. Like, it takes a lot of plant material to make a little bit of essential oil. And the way I work with aromatic medicine, which encompasses pretty much anything that's natural from a plant that smells, right? Like incense, essential oils, hydrosols. Hydrosols is where I really got into aromatic medicine, because it's just very sustainable to make hydrosols for yourself or in smaller batches, more sustainable than essential oils. And hydrosols, a lot of people aren't familiar with them, although they have gained popularity in the last 10 years since I started. They are basically like the essential water. They have the water-loving molecules, volatile compounds, whereas essential oil has the more fat-loving, the carbon chains. So the hydrosol also has like a tiny bit of essential oil in it, like the molecules of the water, which holds the plant's volatiles, has a saturation point for essential oil. So it's just like a very safe way to work with essential oils, and they still smell amazing. So yeah, for me, aromatic medicine is pretty much anything that's going to be able to be inhaled, that has the aroma of a plant. And I call it aromatic medicine to differentiate it from aromatherapy. Aromatic medicine to me is a medicine that bypasses the other physiological processes in the body, right? Like, we don't have to process it through our liver. It goes directly to our amygdala. And these volatile compounds, they have this way just to instantly penetrate our consciousness. We know this. They bring up memories. They bring up colors, visions. They can change our emotional state instantaneously. So it's just really potent medicine that I feel like we all should be using with a lot more care and consciousness. So I hope that answers the question. And humans have been working with aromatic medicine for centuries. I mean, it's some of the oldest ways we've worked with plants outside of just eating them and whatnot. But they have stills dating back to, 1850 BC. And even before that, we see the Egyptians had this huge emphasis with making these aromatic oils, burning incense. Like, perfume means through smoke. And it was a way that our ancient ancestors could send their prayers up to the gods. They would burn these as offerings and send off their prayers. So I'm kind of overgeneralizing all of it, but I like to situate it a little bit in the history of, we find stills coming out of the Swana area, right? Southwest Asia, Northern Africa. And I'm sure more than that. Like, I haven't even gotten into more of like Chinese alchemy or aromatics. It's a whole other world to me. I've kind of stuck with my lineage, which encompasses more of the Southern Italy. I have some Coptic Egyptian roots, and just basically Western medicine. You have anything to add to aromatic medicine?
Nothing to add. I mean, I think, well, it's something that Ash and I love to talk about is finding this intersection between her work and my own, which has so much overlap, and we've talked a lot about hydrosols in particular. Alchemy doesn't always use the same terminology, but when we find it's like the same substances being described under different names. For example, recently we were talking about the importance of hydrosol in the work, and I was speaking about Isaac Hollandus, one of the most famous alchemists, and he does this work where he talks about what's called the water of the clouds. And like Ash was speaking about, hydrosol contains like a certain amount of essential oil in it. And when it comes over, it's often coming over as like a cloudy mixture. And in the work with Hollandus, this water is distilled from the plants in various ways. He's got different recipes, but essentially this water, this natural water, endogenous water inside of plants is gently distilled out, and it comes over technically as this cloudy hydrosol. And it's interesting because in this work, which is quite complex, the hydrosol is featured all throughout the work. It's used to extract the plant, like the water, the endogenous water of the plant is used to extract itself. It's used to cleanse all the different aspects of itself. You know, when the plant is broken down into the elements, the 4 elements, and the elements can all be cleansed by the same water. Then this same water can also be used to elevate, to amplify each of these individual parts. And then finally, this water is used to bring everything back together again. So it's interesting seeing, you know, hydrosol is such an important aspect of Ash's work in aromatics, and seeing this interplay between her work and this traditional work of alchemy, where the hydrosol plays this key essential role in, again, taking everything apart, cleansing it, exalting it, and putting it back together. Water is featured there. So it's, you know, not to add to it, it's kind of just like an addendum or like alongside what she does. It's interesting to see how important these aromatic substances have been in alchemy, as well as, you know, traditional distillation of plants and different aromatics.
Yeah, and you know, I've really veered towards working with hydrosols and aromatics in a more psychological sense. But there are many physical attributes to hydrosols and historical uses. A lot of these waters, floral waters, aromatic waters, were traditionally used. There were periods of time where people had still rooms in their houses that were tended by women to make the aromatic waters. We see this throughout the Middle East, like orange blossom water, rose water being used in drinks, which, you know, in a hot climate, it's going to help cool. It's going to cool the agitation. They're also great digestive. So we see it throughout old materia medicas and different apothecary records that they were using aromatic waters for digestive issues. So I think it's just interesting that they kind of fell out of style. And, you know, I think it might be Anne Harmon's book. I don't want to misquote, but I'm pretty sure she mentions that at one point the essential oils were discarded. They were seen as not as valuable because they were too gross, and the waters were what were used. And what they think with like some of the very old distillation was that it was these maybe ceramic vessels with some kind of animal skin put on top, and they would boil the plant matter, and the waters would go into the skins, and then they'd wring them out and use those aromatic waters. So, I mean, there's a lot we don't know that we're having to kind of speculate about, but I think that's the case for everything. The way things get translated and misconstrued, it's just interesting. Yeah.
Sky or Judith, do you have anything else?
Well, I know that it seems like, Ash, you're super big on like copper alembics. So I was curious if you could speak to your thoughts on why that is.
Actually, it's funny because I started in glass, and my preference is for glass. I feel like glass is more of a alchemical tradition. And I think there's also something very beautiful and symbolic about using glass, like the invisible holding this visible matter, and it allows us to watch the process. And, you know, I've been studying depth psychology for a while now, and Jung spent a lot of time talking about and using alchemy as a framework for his psychology. And it was all about the projection of our unconscious onto this plant matter that you could see through the process through glass. So I probably spent the first 5 years distilling in just glass, but then I outgrew it, and I hit my Venusian years, and, you know, Venus is, copper is its element. And it's also just, it's like a beautiful and traditional way to work with the aromatics. Copper has this way of taking some of the plant molecules that might come over and have these still notes, and the way they interact with the copper, it takes out these like sulfur smells they're called like still notes. And sometimes you have to wait for them to clear up if you're using glass. But if you add a little bit of copper, then they immediately come out smelling really wonderful. And I just think that's interesting because Venus, which governs, you know, beauty and perfumery, is this metal of Venus helps these molecules smell better for us. I mean, I also think that's an interesting line to be like, what smells good, what smells bad. It's all kind of objective, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. I got to experience that yesterday. I normally work with glass and stainless steel, and don't have a lot of experience with copper, and we did a long distillation yesterday, and I noticed immediately that like the hydrosol and the oils smelled so good immediately. I sometimes I describe like a fresh distillation like when you make soup and like you've got all your different ingredients, and when you first start making the soup, it's like everything's kind of separate still. Everybody hasn't gotten together. Like when soup gets better the next day, it forms this like homogeneous smell and taste. And like distillations do that too, where normally I'm letting them sit. They come off kind of sharp with the glass or stainless steel, and they need that time to mature. Whereas, yeah, with the copper still, it was just like immediately, like you can smell it even just from the aroma in the air from the distillation, that it's like rapidly gets to that point of homogeneity where all the smells come back together again. Because of course, all the molecules are coming apart in the distillation and they're coming back together again when they're condensed. And I notice a massive difference with the copper.
They're sexy too. Honestly, a copper alembic is like a very sexy tool to work with. You can see this. There's one here in the background. And so it's a little bit more affordable to go larger for me in the copper rather than the glass. It's also a traditional, we've been using them for at least 1,000 years. They've been kind of come out of Arabic alchemy, and perfumery.
Mm-hmm. And Venus is said to rule herbs too. So another feather in Venus's cap.
The sensual medicine.
I'm just asking because of something I thought of, but I don't know how this stuff works. Because of just being like, I guess, a ceremonial magician, you got to always attribute things to stuff. Is there ideas of like it distilling in blue or red or green jar instead of clear?
Can you say that last part again? In blue or red?
Clear, like instead of clear glass, is there ideas of like, if I want to make something Jupiterian and I'm going to distill it in a blue bottle?
That's interesting. I've actually never considered that. Maybe have you?
I've never worked with something like that, but I could see certainly from a perspective of ceremonial magic how it would work. I mean, I think just in the sense of like how it affects the psyche, in alchemy, at least, we could argue that the most important ingredient is the operator. And so, of course, the state of mind of the operator is paramount to the whole work. Alchemy being very holistic, I feel like it's always this interplay between inner and outer. So, of course, if you're incorporating things like color, symbol, things like that are affecting your psyche, that in turn is going to affect the work. Whether or not that has a direct effect on the work itself, I'm not sure. I mean, we could probably start to speculate on things like the way that light refracts. I mean, if light is shining through different colors and influencing the materia itself, perhaps it makes me think of distillation and how, at least from an alchemical perspective, when you're distilling and these vapors are rising, it's said to be this part of the work where the materia becomes very susceptible to outside influence. It's like these closed gates are opening up in distillation, allowing you to capture these outside influences, let's say astrological influences. So let's say if we had color involved, perhaps we could be capturing those same influences that particular colors could impart. And then as the distillate condenses, it would then trap those influences. We often talk about celestial agriculture, where we can harvest from the stars with different processes used in alchemy. So I don't see why you couldn't use color to grab those same types of influences and trap them into your materia.
And just to be clear, you don't have to only distill aromatic plants. I mean, I've learned from teaching classes, sometimes it's the most obvious thing that needs to be said, right? But it's like, you don't have to just distill aromatic plants. I've distilled non-aromatic plants. I've also distilled things like wax, clay, stones. So if you wanted to throw in some tin for Jupiter, you could iron for Mars. Like you could find other ways too, it's interesting to find ways to incorporate these planetary elements and archetypes. But I teach these 2-day classes where we do the distillation as more of a ceremony. And then in the very beginning, we meet the plant, we set our intentions. At one point where we write our intentions, we burn them and we put that paper into the still. And for me, a big part of it is, I'm sure there's a magic in that paper going in the still, But a larger part of it is that we are priming our unconscious with our intention. And then that whole process, medicine making, that becomes part of the medicine, is that we're making this medicine to help us with this intention. And in a way, like maybe the still and the plants, they all know this, and we can all kind of conspire together to make this more potent medicine. But in general, I really think the more we can be intentional and the more we can communicate with our unconscious in ways that are not linear and not words. You know, the unconscious really speaks through image and symbol and poetry. Then the more potent our magic's going to be, in my opinion. Come distill with us sometimes. Just come on over here.
This reminds me of Ash and I are a big fan of used bookstores. We're kind of hopeless in them. Our bank accounts suffer. And we were in this used bookstore, and you can find a good old book, and like you take a big whiff. You have to smell that old book. And as I'm smelling this book and saying, "Oh, this smells so good," Ash lets me know that she's like, "Yeah, I distilled a bunch of old books one time trying to capture this." So yeah, it doesn't have to be just plants.
You sell that smell to like Bath and Body Works or something. In the candles. If you guys have any questions before I start, because you mentioned harvest, and I actually wanted to start getting into the whole planting and harvest. Did anybody have any questions before I went into that? No.
Judith, if you want to ask something, you go ahead. If not, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm really curious because I just encountered this recently, and I think you have cats, Ash. I'm not sure, but with like cats and things like essential oils, there's all kinds of stuff online and different opinions and debates about the toxicity and exposure and all of these sort of things. So I just was curious to get any of your insights and thoughts into like how in regards to cats being exposed to things like certain aromatic compounds or essential oils. I'm sure it probably depends on what type it is and then to what degree. So I'm curious of like any of your insight on that.
Yeah, I think I probably have an unpopular opinion here, but I don't really use essential oils topically. Cats are really sensitive creatures, right? They're liminal. They've pulled me through different realms many times before. They're just sensitive. And yeah, essential oils can be really aggravating for them and their nervous system and their neurology. So I'm really careful. I used to distill a lot of catnip, and that was safe for the cats. Again, because like the hydrosol, or I said essential oil, but I meant hydrosol. It has such a small amount. It's like 0.03%, essential oil. And that's a really safe way to work with aromatics in cats. So I had this like catnip hydrosol, and you could spray it on a toy and cats would go crazy over it. But yeah, I really don't use essential oils neat, which is like an undiluted pure essential oil often at all, unless it's just for the work of how I use aromatic medicine, which is just smelling it. And my cats aren't doing that work with me, so I don't have them like sniffing essential oils or anything. But yeah, I'm really careful. I think essential oils can not be applied at all and be amazing medicine just through smelling them. And I think it's the same with children too. I'm really careful about recommending any kind of essential oil for kids, but I'm happy to offer up hydrosols. Like my best friend is a midwife, and I'm kind of surrounded with baby world midwives and doula friends. And for a while, I was on this kick of getting them all to bring hydrosols with them to work, and having, moms get used to a smell they really like that then their baby could get used to. And then that way, like if their baby needs to go be held by someone else, you could bring that scent with them. And it's a way to transfer like a sense of comfort and safety. So yeah, there's ways I work with aromatics and sensitive creatures, but it's often not the essential oils directly. So yeah, I would probably avoid it with the cats.
Anything, Judith? Oh, you good? I wanted to get, I guess, kind of into like when you start planting these things. Do you incorporate astrology into all this stuff, the planting and harvesting?
I do, to almost a debilitating sense.
Really? Okay, good. Can we hear a little bit about that? That's great.
I've had to convince myself to lighten up a little bit with it, because it can be hard when you're on a schedule and you're like, now is the perfect hour to harvest this plant or to pick this plant, and it just fucks your whole schedule up. And but it's part of the intention, right? Like I've been saying, is like I really try to be intentional with every step of the process. So, and I studied with some biodynamic farmers who were even more wildly out there than I am. I studied with one person who would plant things at certain angles, like build up beds at certain angles so that they had a relationship to the sun. It was honestly a little bit too intense for me, but it was really interesting to see like how far you can go with this. But yeah, it's an important process, and I think for you as well, right?
Yeah. Astrology is an interesting one for me, because I try to like approach everything as like a skeptic. I'm not a believer, but astrology is something that just continuously proves itself to be correct. So it's hard to dismiss, and at this point, it's hard to not incorporate it in literally every aspect of my life. But I did a lot of farming a few years ago with a friend of mine, and he was using the biodynamic calendar. I was already into astrology. I'd already kind of given up on trying to completely disprove it, and was using it in my life, but I hadn't planted according to this calendar before. And it was interesting too, because it's a sidereal calendar, and I was getting interested in sidereal astrology at that time. So where you're having the actual alignments with the placements of the stars rather than the solar tropical calendar. And so we started doing a lot of like side-by-side tests to start to actually bring some validity into it. Because there's obviously the psychological aspect of it. We could say this is one big meditation and ritual, and that has a certain level of value. But then, we could start to look at some more objective things too and say, is there something measurable here? Is there something that is different when we work in lockstep with the stars? And I'll give one example. I could give dozens of them, but it proved itself over and over again. And one particular example I can think of is we had a crop of wormwood, 2 rows side by side. And one day we chose to pick it at the wrong time, essentially. So it was not in cohesion with any sort of rulership of the plant or the part of the plant too, because that's another aspect of biodynamic farming. There's different, the moon is moving through, and whatever planets or signs the moon are in, it'll delineate basically, is this a root time? Is this a leaf time? Is this a fruit time? Is this a flower time? So we harvested the wormwood leaf at what would have been considered a totally normal time to harvest the plant, but it wasn't in sync with the calendar. And then we distilled it. We got a decent hydrosol, and we didn't get a single drop of oil. And then the next day, we picked it at the perfect time. We picked it it was a leaf day, so it was the right day to pick it. And we picked it with a sidereal rising of the planet. So we looked at the actual placement of Mars rising up on the horizon. So as that energy is building, we were working with the plant under Mars at the time. We harvested from the same plants. We distilled the exact same amount in the same still, and we got a huge abundance of essential oil. So one day apart, really the plants looked the same, they smelled the same. There was no weird weather. There's no outside thing that we could say would have interfered with the essential oil yield. The only thing that really changed about it was the time that we chose to pick it. And of course, it's not going to always be that way, but it was whenever we put it to the test, these things just kept coming up as correct. And really, in the end, it was just, for me, it helped kind of nail down the idea that, everything is connected. So the more we can get in tune with intricate calendars of nature, which I think astrology is, the more things flow. You're not bumping up against something that's pre-existing and going to flow whether you like it or not. You flow with the river rather than trying to grab onto the sides and fight your way through it. It just worked better and easier flowing with the stars. And again, I could think of dozens of examples of this. Planting a tray of chamomile one day at the right time, planting it the next day, same seeds, same water, same greenhouse and everything. The tray planted at the right time, just like crazy germination rate. The other tray, not so great. some plants, okay, look, this row is planted really well. This row produced 30% more herb than the row that wasn't. It kept happening over and over and over again. And it just makes sense after a while, like we don't tend to like go hang out to sunbathe on the beach in the middle of winter in the Northern Hemisphere. It's like, that's just an obvious, calendar thing to adhere to. And this is just like a more subtle calendar to look at that I think does have a real tangible reality.
That is awesome. That is wild. You've actually even seen it firsthand make a difference. It's pretty cool.
It's kind of frustrating because, like Ash said, it's like all of a sudden scheduling becomes, scheduling's hard enough as an entrepreneur or a farmer or a medicine maker. But when you're having to plan your whole life around astrological cycles, it throws a whole new stick in your spokes trying to get things done. It's like, well, the day starts at 3:46 a.m. today, I guess. You work when you have to.
I'm so compelled by the plants too. This year I told myself, I'm like, this is not going to be a medicine making year. It's not going to be a gardening year. I just graduated from a master's program. I'm trying to reorient my life a little bit. And then I find myself knee deep back gardening again. Like, it's just part of my rhythm of life at this point. So I was able to back off a little bit this year, but I'm still out there, especially right now. It's like almost a daily thing to be harvesting, medicine making. So, and I think too, sidereal versus tropical astrology, right? Like they're not the same thing. They're two different languages. And I actually use them both with working with the plants. I use sidereal a lot, like what Daniel was saying with planting. The moon calendar for me, like planting with the moon phases, is just very key. But also I don't discard, because I'm rooted in Western astrology, which is more of the psychological, right? It's about the Earth's relationship to the sun. This is more about the self. And so sometimes if I'm making these medicines, these aromatic medicines that I know I'm going to be working with in a more psychological manner, I'll harvest according to that calendar. So it's not just like using astrology, then it's like choosing which language you're going to use within that, if that makes sense.
Which one do you find easier to work around?
That's a really good question. Maybe for me, Western I think they're kind of the same. I'm more tuned into Western astrology on a daily basis. But with the moon phases, I'm also very tuned into those. So maybe when it came to planting with the moon, more sidereal, and harvesting, I kind of take into account both. It's just kind of comes down to my intention. It's so easy these days, right? You can just get online and look something up. So they've really made it pretty easy to follow either one.
What other? I know you mentioned what I guess ways. What kind of stuff do you do with these plants? Like once you're done with it, I know you mentioned hydrosol, and I really don't even understand that situation really. But like, what are the methods, or what methods do you use to like start doing stuff with the plants after you're done?
Well, let's back up. So you don't understand hydrosol?
Well, I really don't. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm assuming you're evaporating stuff with that. Like, I really didn't quite understand. Like,
well, Daniel was talking about a way to use hydrosol in another type of medicine making process. Like, there's so many different ways. There's so many different ways you can make medicine within alchemy. There's not just like with making an herbal medicine tincture that's not a spagyric. It's pretty straightforward. There's this like recipe. It's like we do 1 to 2 fresh plant material, this % alcohol. We let it sit for this amount of time, and then we press it out, and we're good.
Yeah.
With aromatic medicine, with alchemy in general, there's just so many more ways to make medicine, so many different types of medicine, and even within alchemy, like working with the operations. I'm not sure how familiar y'all are with this, but okay, well, I'm not going to go there. But in general, just to back up to hydrosols, a hydrosol can be as simple as you put your plant material in the still. So if we were looking at this guy behind me, for everyone that can see it, we have the bottom, the pot, that's where the water goes. There's a column, you put your plants inside the column. You have a Moor's head tap, and then there's a swan neck, and that goes into a condenser. So what's happening is the water's heating up, it's going through the plant matter, unless you're doing a hydrodistillation in which you have plant matter in the water, but we'll save that. So it's going through plant matter, it's opening the plant up, it's releasing these volatile compounds. They're going into the steam. The steam is then hitting the air, getting cooled, hitting a condenser that's full of cold water. And when it comes out, what you get for most cases is an essential oil and a hydrosol. So essential oil and an essential water. So you have the hydrophilic and the lipophilic. Lipophilic is the essential oil, hydrophilic is the hydrosol. And you can separate those out, work with them separately. You can blend them together, work with them together. There's lots of different ways to use it. So hydrosol would just be the water component that is saturated with plant volatiles. And that's a key thing to work with a hydrosol. They typically have a lower pH. I think one issue I see teaching is that there's a certain point in the process where you have to turn your sil off, because not all the water you're working with turns into a hydrosol. At some point, you're going to get just kind of, you've already got all the volatiles out of the plant. You've already saturated these molecules of water with the plant volatiles. So I don't know. Does that help at all? Do you understand hydrosols any better?
No, yeah, no. What I was getting at is like I didn't understand the process of making it, and I was gonna, I guess, ask like, is there other techniques that you use to make your products there besides that?
For the hydrosols, that's the technique I use. I use a glass still. They're pretty comparable. Once you understand the process of distillation, you can get creative and make it out of crazy shit. Like you could go home, use a teapot and hook it up with a tube to something else. And you can do it on your stovetop just using a pot and a lid that's upside down with ice in the top. You have your plant matter in the pot. It heats up, hits the top of the lid where it's cold. It condenses and falls back down into, like, you put a bowl inside the pot. That's a really simple way to do it. You can YouTube it. There's lots of bad examples out there on YouTube. But I mean, distillation also, it's not a man-made process, right? This is happening all around us. I think this is like another level of the medicine that's interesting, is that like it's a microcosm of the macrocosm. Like distillation's happening all the time. It's happening with the rain. It's happening on our cups, like a cold cup. It's happening in our psyche all the time. When we take in information, we distill it, turn it into how we move forward in life. So just because I like to talk a little convoluted and in circles and more poetically, like there's just a lot of ways to look at distillation. But when I'm making plant medicine, I'm typically using one of these stills I have, either the copper or the glass, or I do have a stainless steel as well. And I'm looking to make a essential oil and a hydrosol.
Nice. You know, it's funny. The way you were explaining how you were doing something before gave me like a flashback. I've been in prison before. I've mentioned it on the show. I did 2 years in the feds, and one time I walked into the bathroom, and I was like, "Yo, what the fuck is this on the floor?" And they had like this garbage bag that, like, I guess they blew up with air, and then they had like a plastic garbage can in the middle of it, and they had hooch in there. And then they had taken a cord off of a vacuum and like cut it and tied a piece of metal to the two pieces at the end, plugged it in, threw it inside the hooch, and the evaporation would go up and hit the bag and then all drip down to the bottom, and they're making fucking moonshine.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, who the fuck comes up with this in here?
Oh, I love that. I mean, I've had people in classes say that this seems like an inaccessible medicine. And I'm like, no, not if you get inventive. All you have to understand is that what you need to do is heat up the thing you're working with, turn it into steam, and then cool the steam down to turn it back into a liquid, you know?
Yeah, even us degenerate prisoners knew how to do that.
This reminds me of one of my main teacher in alchemy, Robert Bartlett. I want to give him a shout out. In the first class I ever took from him, somebody made this point that Ash said, is like, oh, this seems so like out of reach, you know, like distilling alcohol and things like that. And he's like, oh no, it's not out of reach. You just need a Ziploc bag. And we're like, what? And so like he took a little bit of wine and he poured it into a Ziploc bag and he put it in a cup on the windowsill, and he just took a corner of the bag and pulled it over the side of the cup. And so the sun is hitting the wine in the Ziploc bag. And because there's a corner pulled over, you know, the alcohol evaporates, it condenses on the bag and just drips into the corner of the cup. So by the end of the class, there's a little bit of clear alcohol in the bottom of the Ziploc bag. So, I mean, it is very, very simple. And like Ash said, it's simple because it's an essential process of life. It's literally happening everywhere, in everything, essentially all the time. So we can get really fancy with tools like getting nice copper stills like this one, or glassware and things like that. But you can. There's many different hallways to the same room.
What are some of your favorite ones to work with, and why?
You want to talk about that?
Plants, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it's hard for me to have favorites, but I do work with yarrow a lot when I'm teaching. And part of the reason I love working with yarrow, one, it's a plant that's been around and in a relationship with humans for a very long time. And when you distill yarrow, it's a very Venusian plant. It produces this essential oil called azulene. And this is not actually in the plant on its own yet. It has to go through this process, and then it turns into a blue hydrosol. So when I'm teaching, it makes it like extra magical, because instead of just having this kind of clear essential oil, we get this blue essential oil and this blue hinged hydrosol. So that's one reason I love working with it. The other is just the medicine of yarrow to me is very valuable for our times. It's really, my favorite way to get to know a plant is we can amplify it by looking at the exoteric information, like within books and lineages and traditions, and that's very important. But then we can also have the esoteric or the Gnostic experience of working with that plant directly. And my experience of working with yarrow, Achillea milliifolum, is that it went directly into my heart space and helped me kind of remove the constructs I had that weren't mine. It was very Venusian, where it centered me back in my own values. And yarrow is said to physically, it helps stop bleeding. It gets the name Achillea from Achilles because it was carried on the battlefield to stop bleeding. So Achilles carried it around and put it on, wounds to stop the bleeding. And we see it within more of the metaphysical medicine realms being said that use yarrow for boundaries. It helps, leaky holes in your aura. And I'm like, Daniel, I'm a skeptic. These things need to make sense, even if it's in a weird mystical sense or a very direct experiencing of it. Yeah. And I sensed this, that when it helped me understand what my own values were, then it helped my energy field or my aura or my boundaries be stronger, because I knew what was mine and what wasn't mine, if that makes sense. So yarrow is always a top one for me, but I'm always cycling through. I'm falling in love every time I distill with the plant, at hand. So you have a favorite?
I feel the same as you. I mean, how can you choose a favorite? It's they're all my buddies, right? But I feel I go through seasonal cycles. I'm tempted to say rose. Rose has just always been with me. Rose has always been one of my favorite medicines for so many reasons. Just the symbolism of rose. I love the smell of rose. I love the way it is. It's a hard opening herb, but at the same time, it's not. It's got its thorns too. The hard opening experience is not always easy and sweet and soft. It can actually be quite painful. And so rose has that polarity to it, where it's tied to that one anchor of the heart, but at the same time, it can bring you to both sides of the fence, sweetness and also sharpness as well. Boundaries is another thing that I've learned a lot with rose. To kind of build off of what Ash was saying with yarrow, but right now I'm loving mimosa. So mimosa is my new plant here. I've this is albizia, the species I'm speaking about. I've had a lot of experience with other species of mimosa or acacia, this whole related family. There's different plants all over the world that are related. I was quite obsessed with the acacia, and that was in Egypt or in the Middle East, and its relation to the mysteries in general, and its psychoactive components, its connections to Freemasonry and maybe even Sufism and all these different esoteric orders. But now for the first time, I'm being introduced to this other species that's growing here, and it's not indigenous to here too. Yeah. It's growing all over here right now. It's another heart medicine, and it's in bloom here right now. And it's got these like alien pink flowers that just smell like absolutely incredible. Like, it's like once you know the plant, it's like you can see it. You're driving and you can see it like miles and miles away. You know that it's mimosa. It's just got this signature. And I'm loving it right now. Like, honestly, just smelling it, and we've been harvesting it to make medicine with it. But like in the moment, this plant is just really drawing me in for many different reasons. And I'm just exploring different ways to work with it. Like you've got these ethereal, like alien flowers that, make sense, where it's considered to be like an uplifting medicine, but the bark of the plant too is said to be grounding. So there's all these different ways to use the plant, and I'm just diving into mimosa right now. It's definitely my favorite at the moment.
In Chinese medicine, they call it the collective happiness tree.
Yeah,
and like literally just seeing it and smelling it makes you happy. It's these alien flowers he talks about. They just look like they remind me of like little pink fireworks, and you probably see them around where you are, Nick. I'm sure they grows over there.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think those are the things. A couple of blocks down, they have like trees on both sides that go over the road, and it looks just like what you were explaining. Pink too.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the first plant I ever distilled on my own was marigold, and it was funny because I was just laying under some marigold plants I had on the farm I was living at, and it was summertime, and I was smelling them. A lot of people don't like the smell of marigolds, but I've always loved it, and it's got such a signature of the sun, right? It holds the sun archetype, and like in Mexican tradition, it was placed for the Day of the Dead and for the ancestors because it kind of lights this way for them to come in. And so it was the first one I distilled because I was like, how do I have this essence in the winter when I'm depressed, And I immediately like harvested it. I had just gotten this little teeny glass still. And so I'll always have an affinity for marigold just because it was kind of my gateway. And
Cool. Luna, Sky, did you want to ask anything?
I do have a question, because you say you use it for medicine. How do you choose what form of medicine you're going to use it for when you start the work? Because you got to time it when you plant it and when you pick it. And I don't know if you use astrology as well when you distill it as well. So if you could walk us through that process.
Yeah. It's a really good question. And I think it comes down to the intention of what medicine I plan to make with it, which it's funny because we had this issue 2 days ago. I took Daniel out to one of my friend's local farms, Kestrel Herb Farms, where I can get a lot of fresh plant material. And I love working with fresh plant material, especially for distillation. And you're out there and it's like, sometimes you're like, well, am I going to tincture this or am I going to distill this? So you have to first have that intention of what type of medicine do you want to make? And then there's also how you want to work with it. So for me, a lot of times I'm distilling on Friday for Venus. Daniel doesn't buy into the days of the week. Can I say that?
More or less.
Again, but it's like,
I'd be crazy with that shit. I'd be down to the minute, the moon, the hour.
And sometimes if I'm going to be making aromatic medicine, there's other things I have to consider about like what time of the day I'm harvesting it, because, I'm not wanting to harvest at like 2 p.m. under the sun where most of the volatiles have gone off into the atmosphere already. So there will be specific windows, but within those windows, you can find the astrology. Like, when you really start getting into that, it's like the microcosms. You can get it all the way down to like, even within an hour, you could find what section of that hour might relate more to a certain planet. So am I getting away from the question? Can you get back on track here with the question?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I think like you're saying, like there's so many levels of how deep you want to dive into it. Something that I was thinking about with this question too, is that when we're working with plants, like traditionally they're thought to be of mixed influence. So they don't necessarily have one single planetary ruler. And so when we're deciding on, let's say when we want to plant, when we want to harvest, when we want to start different processes of the medicine making aspect of the work, we can consider which way we kind of want to like drive the plant into. Like if a plant, let's say, has a mixed rulership of, say, the sun and Mercury, but you want to work with more of its psychological, mental capabilities, which is associated with Mercury, then we can work with that planet as a ruler for choosing when we do everything that we're doing. But like Ash said, it's like you can make it as simple or as complex as you want. You can time it right down to the minute or the second you're going to do every single stage of the work, because of course every single stage of the work has this like external symbol in the sky that we can try to correlate with, or we can try to use larger cycles too, and feel good about that, and make it a little bit more open. But yeah, it depends on how complex you want to get, because like I said, you could literally time every single step of the process from the point of planting the seeds or even harvesting those seeds before you plant them to every single stage of the medicine making work too. For example, like with my work or with Ash's work, there's all these stages of the medicine making, and each of them have associations with the stars and the planets, and so we can find ideal astrological elections for like every single stage of that. Something that I like, in my personal process with astrology is, over time, I've learned to kind of trust a little bit more. And I've always loved to use astrology as a reflective mechanism, which, instead of like kind of planning my day based on it, I'll look at my day afterwards and say, what was going on? Like I'll find some weeks all of a sudden I'm feeling like processing certain plants, or certain plants are available, or I'm doing certain types of processes. And then when I look back at the astrology, I see what's going on in the stars and the planets, that is associated with whatever pattern was going on in my work that week. So the thing is that we are innately tied to these cycles of nature, right? And I think when you kind of if you can kind of let go and again, like float down the river of the cycles of nature, oftentimes we're just in sync with it. So I'm in my process, I'm learning more to trust that, and trust how I actually feel about things, rather than trying to get too nitty gritty into the details. And I'm, I guess at this point, not surprised when I look back at the astrological elections of what I'm doing and see like they're often quite congruent. It's again, it's this interplay, I think, between conscious and unconscious. I think it's great to use these systems to kind of give us training wheels in order to start to learn the cycles. And then, of course, after a time, you don't need the training wheels any longer. You start to just like get into that rhythm on your own, and you can ride your bike without the training wheels. And so I'm kind of in the middle of that somewhere, where I'm learning to trust in the process and not be so hyper vigilant about planning every single second of my work based on looking at the stars before I start doing it. But that's just where I'm at with it personally right now.
Well, and I think maybe just to try to veer it even more back to your question, Judith, but like my original alchemy teacher, it was very big that you harvest the plant at the time of the election that you want. So that was the most important part of the medicine making, was to harvest at the time, because that's when the plant is absorbing that astrological influence. But in my mind, I've come to my own sense of like, yes, that would be like, there's a way that we could be like, make it the most amazing. The most amazing is if we harvest it at the right time and we make it at the right time and every little thing. But just because we harvest the plant doesn't mean the plant is no longer alive. Like if you're truly animistic about it, then it's like, it's always alive. And so if I have to harvest a plant not at the most ideal time, can I also just conjure or set up a ritual to call in that god or that archetype or that energy? And I have found that kind of valuable for the process too. And it makes it kind of fun too when you got music going and incense burning and you're like trying to like really have a dance with the gods and make this medicine in a, I don't know, the most beautiful way you can, even though maybe you missed the perfect time to harvest it. So, you know, one of the things I say when I'm teaching distillation is like, try not to let everything being perfect have you not just go into the work. The most important part is that you just start the work. Just like getting, and I have the sense, Judith, that you already work with plants. But it's like, yeah, it's like just getting in there and doing it and seeing from your own experience, like what's happening and what's working. Like that's such invaluable information. And it's not to forego having a teacher. Like I think we all need mentors and teachers and lineages, but we're not going to get anywhere if we don't just go for it. And I have a Virgo moon. So in my past, I've talked myself out of doing things if they aren't exactly perfect. So maybe that's like been the chip on my shoulder. And so I've just had to learn that sometimes it's like what Daniel's saying, like we just have to trust. Like it's maybe one of the biggest things I've learned is divine timing and trusting in the process.
I needed you to tell me that because I happen to be a Virgo, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I feel you.
You can relate on the details.
Yeah,
you could drive yourself crazy with it. And
yes.
I like my friend that I was farming with, like I was crazy about the details, and there was just some days where he just shook his head at me like, "Why are you making this so difficult?" And he, a lot of the times, I have to say, like he was probably in a little bit of a happier, easier going mood than I was, because I'm freaking out looking at the sky and looking at my calendar and doing calculations on my phone, and you know he's chewing on a piece of grass, just smiling at the fields, right? So it's interesting. But this makes me think. This whole conversation makes me think about a quote from Manly P. Hall where he says, "Man is destined to rule over the stars." You know, talking about our destiny, where it's, you know, I think there's a point where we come from a point of certain unconsciousness, and we can look at systems like astrology to guide us, to get us a little bit closer to understanding how we can work in sync with nature. But eventually, when that teaching becomes embodied, we start working, you know, alongside it. So rather than being, you know, subservient to the forces of nature, it's like we're riding right alongside of it, you know, in sync with it. And so we're kind of on that journey of getting to that point where we're not so susceptible to the weather. Because realistically, you know, if we look at the Hermetic principle of all this, is like everything, all the pieces are always there at all times. There's no separation of the different energies or, you know, our planetary archetypes or zodiac signs or anything. Everything is there all at once. So all these things are always available. And that makes me think of what Ash was saying about ritualizing, where maybe you miss the wrong moment, but you can always bring in the energy of the stars or the planets through, you know, through music and color and aromatics. You know, you can always find ways to evoke or invoke these archetypal forces.
I think it was James Hillman. I could be misspeaking, but I'm pretty sure James Hillman, who did a lot of archetypal psychology, said that the gods just want us to pay attention to them. You know, like we just need to give them a nod of like, hey, we're here and we're paying attention. And what that really speaks to me too is just to bring it back to like our own psyche and our own conscious and how we're connected into the greater web, is like just showing that you're paying attention and that you have this relational aspect with the plants or anything. Like, I think that's a great starting point. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, both of you. Actually, thank you for mentioning it being used as a guide. And I actually I would have never thought about if I missed that time of harvesting it during that window of actually drawing down the energy of the god or the goddess for that type of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for getting into all that, both of you. That was awesome. That was,
we could literally just talk. We'll just take over the show. We'll just keep talking and talking.
This is just a window into our day to day where we're just rapping off about anything and everything.
Yeah, well, I want people to hear how you know how deep it could get as well. You know what I'm saying? Because it can, you know.
The whole time you guys were talking about that, I had Phoenix Aurelius's voice in my head saying, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good."
Oh, I like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great advice.
I do have a question for you, Ash. You mentioned that you also you grow your own herbs and you purchase herbs as well. So, is there a difference in energy for you when you do on the difference?
I think so. I mean, there's definitely something about tending your own, like watching a plant go from seed to basket to medicine. But where I purchase herbs from, I I really look for farms that I think are taking care of the earth really well. And there's not a ton of them out there. They're getting more and more, but honestly, there's not a lot of money in growing herbs. And I think we need to be supporting these small herb growers. It's just, I hate saying one thing's better than another, but I do think that having fresh herb material makes better medicine, because a lot of these big herb companies, their plant material has been sitting around for a long time before it gets to you, and it's touched lots of hands and it's gone through lots of machinery, and like all of these are going to take a little bit from that plant or add a little bit to that plant. And so if you're able to grow your own, or even find a farm near you or someone that might ship overnight, I just think the closer you can get to that plant, um, possibly the better potency of the medicine, but that's all. It's all up for debate depending on which way you want to swing it, right? So Daniel's really good at the chemistry of it. He could talk more about the actual chemistry of what would make it more potent physically. But yeah, I do think there's something different. Like growing a plant and harvesting it, watching it grow. I learned so much just from watching a plant grow. I mean, I think it was Paracelsus that kind of coined the doctrine of signatures. And I think we can find these doctrine of signatures, you know, the idea of like what a plant looks like might indicate what it's good for. A walnut looking like a brain, and it shows that its fats are good for our brain health. But I think you see that even just watching a plant. Like a lot of times, especially as I work more and more with the indigenous plants to where I live, they aren't all written from these Western dudes, you know, the Western lens with the medical astrology associations of the planets. You have to figure that out for yourself if you're using that lens with the plants that grow here. And so actually watching a plant grow has always helped me with that, seeing like what's the environment they thrive in and how are they growing? What's their relationship to the sun and to the water and to the air? So yeah, just being able to have access to growing plants, I think is super informative and it's special.
I agree.
But again, if you can't grow your own plants, if all you can do is buy some bulk herb off the internet, like great, do it. Just do it, you know?
I used to get fresh lavender from some Vietnam vet that used to grow it because grow it himself because he used to help with like his PTSD and anxiety.
Wow.
So I figured, you know, help the dude out. I used to buy it off of him off of Etsy instead.
Nice. I love
Yeah,
lavender.
yeah, I'll tell you, it was such a difference. Like just my experience from getting lavender from other places, it looked completely like different. Like the color and everything was really nice.
When you start comparing bulk herbs you buy from these large herb companies to something fresh, it's kind of uncomparable. And
Like, you picked this way too early, didn't you?
right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
even
Or
fully grown.
like what kind of radiation has it gone through in all of its travel? How long has it sat around? I did an intensive with someone from Italy that was specializing in making essential oils. And man, the essential oil industry, they can get really nitpicky about like the plant needs to get harvested and put directly in the still because within an hour you're losing some of the aromatics. So if you're thinking about it that way, yeah, if a plant's sitting out for a year, what's happening? Like what's changing chemically? Is it exposed to the air? So
I have a selfish question to ask
please.
because you guys mentioned lavender. And to tell you the truth, it is the one plant I cannot grow from seed to save my life. Do you have any advice for me?
Lavender is hard to start from seed. It needs like to be on heating trays. Like it needs some care. But you can grow it from a cutting. So you might want to look into doing that. Have you ever done it from a cutting?
Yeah, it's easier.
Yeah, go find a lavender that you really like and do some cuttings. You might want to get like some rooting agent, or you can use a little willow tea. And then you can even buy, I learned this recently, they sell like rooting soils. They're like little cubes.
Yeah.
And they already have like a rooting agent in them, and you can take your cuttings and just stick them in there and keep them moist, and it makes it easy.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, I have heard that's notoriously hard to grow from seed.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask before we start to wrap it up, are you two into resins at all? Yeah.
Have to be.
Yeah, I love resins.
Which, yeah, what is some of your favorite with those?
Well, I definitely love labdanum, and it's been used for centuries. Have you ever worked with it?
Yeah, I have it. I have it.
The smell just like gets me.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised you even said that, because I don't hear people mention that one too often, actually.
I love it. Actually, I was introduced to labdanum from my main aromatic teachers, Kathy Skipper and Florian. They run a business called Aromanosis. And anyways, they work with aromatics in the same sense of working with the psyche. And they have this story about labdanum being used by rulers, pharaohs. I mean, I can't directly quote the stories, but like in the beards as a beard oil. And part of labdanum's work and what I've learned from them is that it helps us be aware of our shadow. And so if a ruler, back when maybe kings actually were working for the people, could be aware of their shadow, they would rule better. So that's like a little story that you don't find many places, that's just handed down somehow. That's interesting. But so I love labdanum. I mean, you have to love frankincense, right? It's just been around forever. It's like almost like all the Orphic hymns start with like this frankincense for this god, this god, this god. But for like a local resin, I work a lot with white pine, or sometimes I go out west to see my friends, and I love pinyon pine resin. So if you can get your hands on some of that, if you haven't worked with it, I would suggest it. It's really beautiful.
Do you ever have mastic gum?
Yeah, I love mastic too.
Yeah. What about you, Mark?
Hemlock.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. We were on a hike and we found a hemlock tree that was just like dripping, and ash just like, like metal to a magnet, just like right on the tree, just like clawing her fingers down, taking balls of this resin.
I was being nice, trees are producing a resin as a way to heal a wound on them. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to just like scrape the shit out of the tree and cause another wound. You want them to, take care of the tree, ask if you can take some of its resin. But it works the same for us, I think, too. Like I love using resins and oils because I feel like it just helps me like kind of hold my energy together. It provides this kind of like healing oil throughout my body. It helps me just stay more embodied, which has been my lifelong work. And I think I've done a good job at that at this point. But
for sure.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite resins is benzoin. I love the smell, but it has this. I love crystals, and benzoin. If you heat it into, we call it a blind head in alchemy. So imagine just like a flask on the bottom and the resin's inside the flask, and then you have an inverted flask on top of it. If you gently heat the benzoin, one of the aromatic volatiles in it, rather than being an oil, is a crystalline salt. So when you heat it into this cool top, it grows like snowflakes or like long, thin, white needles, like perfect crystals. And it'll actually like fill the entire, imagine like a globe, like two globes like glued together, and the top will completely fill with these beautiful crystals, which smell like absolutely divine. And they form all kinds of different crystal matrices depending on, how big is the setup and what is the temperature and all that. But you can grow all these intense crystal matrices just by gently heating benzoin into a cooled surface. So not only is it really, really, really nice to smell, but it's really, really beautiful to work with as well.
So what else are y'all working with? What other resins do we have on the table here?
I have benzoin. I like myrrh.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously frankincense. There was another one that I used to use as a substitute for myrrh. I can't remember the name now. It was pretty dark too. I have copal.
Mm.
Mm.
That
Opal.
was nice.
Yeah. Dragon's blood.
Mm.
Yeah, that's all I think I'll like out here now.
Mhm.
What about you, Judith? You got any resins over there?
All I have is frankincense. It's the easiest thing to get here in New York.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Are you in the city?
On the outskirts. I'm in the 5 boroughs.
Okay.
So might as well say the city. But I do have a question to you when it comes to distilling. You mentioned different techniques. Is there any material that you shouldn't use when trying to distill? Because I was surprised that you said copper gave such a good outcome. So I'm wondering if there's any metals or any materials that we shouldn't use when trying to make these medicines.
I mean, I usually just offer people the awareness around anything that's poisonous. I mean, I've distilled a lot of poisonous plants. You just have to be really careful. So that, I mean, metals, one thing I would say with a lot of the copper is you want to make sure you're buying a copper still from a company that can prove they don't have lead in their solder. Lead's not going to come over in the still. But if there's lead in the solder, or in the hardware on your condenser, essential oils are really good at pooling metals. And so that's just one. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing to be aware of, looking at that. So yeah, and I'm really careful. I try to avoid any kind of like plastics. I mean, you can do an experiment for yourself, but if you take a drop of an essential oil and put it on plastic, it will literally like eat it away. Or another reason I like working with that yarrow in the blue is because it demonstrates how much essential oils will go into a plastic because you can see it when it's blue. So I just avoid keeping things in plastic or having a lot of plastic tubing around. Like in my classes, I teach how to kind of to use more copper piping than the typical plastic tubings they come with for collecting. So little teeny hacks here and there, but I think the biggest one would just to be careful about the solder and hardware on the copper stills, just making sure that it's a reputable company. There's a lot of cool old stills out there you can find, especially where I'm in Appalachia. Like I've been given some old moonshining stills to hold on to and whatnot. And it's like, I don't know what was in those solders unless I get them tested. So.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Nick,
Scott,
do you yeah, I was gonna say, do you mind if I ask something?
yeah, go for it.
I thought this would be an interesting one. I think maybe Daniel will be able to complement it as well. So I saw on your Instagram, Ash, it's scent as sacred ferment, alchemical stage of fermentio and the secret fire. Was that like a paper you written, or tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was I just graduated from Pacifica Graduate Institute, and my big final kind of thesis project was on my work with fermentatio, which within alchemy, we are often in modern times forgetting this phase of the yellowing or the citroniness. We think of the black, the negredo, the white, the albedo, and the red, the rubedo. And there's always kind of this like not a lot of attention given to the yellowing, which is where fermentation sits, the fermentatio. So because I work with aromatics more psychologically, I dove in the last 2 years while I was in this program about how scent can become the yeast or the ferment. Like, I mean, when you're reading old alchemical books during the fermentation, sometimes they're literally throwing like poop in, like they're doing crazy stuff to get this ferment going sometimes. And so the way I work with aromatics, which is like a literal whole other conversation, is once we've made them and once we have the conjunction with our hydrosol and essential oil, our product, basically what we're looking for, the real work is happening once we inhale it. Once we introduce this plant spirit and soul into our own psyche, so it becomes this secret fire. It becomes this psychic yeast that helps us engage our imagination. our true imagination, not like a fantastical, but there's lots of, writings out there about the Corbin called it the mundus imaginalis, but it's a real realm, right? And how does scent help us engage this realm? And in this realm is where we can really talk with our unconscious parts and discover more meaning for ourselves. So I don't know if any of that really makes sense. Daniel has a lot to say about Secret Fire, though, I think. So
He sure does.
Well, I don't want to take it too far from what you're saying. I think what Ash is talking about is really what I see as one of the most important aspects of her work. And really, you could have her on again and have a whole show just on this concept of aromatics as a ferment, bringing this medicine into yourself and that triggering this reaction internally inside yourself, which, speaking to the Secret Fire, it is a way, when we think about fermentation, imagine like there's this potential in a substance. Let's just use alcohol as an example. We ferment a sugar. That sugar has building block inside of it that when the right additive is added, the yeast is added, this potential of alcohol is created as a result of it. The old alchemists sometimes called it like the water of life. Alcohol would be one example of this, creating this burning spirit that comes off. It's invisible, the alcohol vapors are essentially invisible. The alcohol itself is clear, but there's this fire inside of us, right? This latent potential inside of us and inside of everything. And, our experience in life is what is kind of tending that latent secret fire and bringing it up and out of us, bringing it to fruition. And I think that, well, I'm learning quite a bit more about it right now too, with Ash's perspective on this, but bringing like aromatics are such a potent way of, lighting that fire and illuminating that latent potential that we all have inside of ourselves in many, many, many different ways. Of course, each plant has, a very particular personality. So it, like a key into a lock, comes into ourselves, and there's something inside of us that is relative to that plant, and it can come in and open up, liberate, awaken, exalt that latent potential that we have inside of ourselves. And so, yeah, maybe you'll have to have Ash on again to go more into this, because again, I think it is some of the most amazing work that she's doing and some of the most important work that she's doing in this whole field of aromatics.
It comes down from a lineage. I really started working with aromatics in this way, kind of on my own, but then I quickly met up with these teachers I mentioned at Aromanosis, and they work with the psyche a lot. And then it was me finding this Secret Fire and fermentatio that kind of led me into this 2-year master program of studying the more depth psychological lens of, fermentation. It's the imagination. It's that secret fire coming alive and the colorful peacock's tail coming alive in our own being. So I think it's really interesting stuff. But
I think it touches on an important point too that I'm thinking about a lot lately too. And like for me, like Ash and I are like, without our relationship with alchemy, like we do a lot of the same things. We're very both technically inclined, making the medicines, and we're both interested in the psychology and the spiritual aspects of it. We kind of favor one of those sides each. And, sometimes I get a little bit wrapped up in the laboratory aspect of the work, which of course is this like external aspect of the work. But, if we don't integrate that, if we don't actually bring the medicine into ourselves, if we don't actually awaken those same processes in ourselves and awaken that, that final product inside of ourselves, we're still disconnected, right? And I mean, I think the whole point of alchemy really is wholeness, so I think her work with that is really reminding me that, it's not all about this external process of seeking after, medicines external to ourselves. Like we need to really bring these lessons, even if they're not physical, like Ash is talking about this very ethereal process of even just smelling something, like there's no, it's so simple, but it awakens these processes inside of ourselves. We may be doing it outside of ourselves in the lab, but again, if it's not happening inside of us, it's disconnected and you're not getting anywhere, right? I think I said last night to Ash, it's like if you're hungry and you tape a sandwich to your stomach, it's like you're close, but you don't quite quench that hunger. You really need to bring the experience inside of yourself. It has to happen in your emotions and your psyche and in your physical body as well. And
it's all one thing.
It's all one thing in the end. Yeah.
Daniel taught a really great class here a couple months ago on May Dew. And you talked a lot about the secret fire then.
I did.
Being captured in the morning, May Dew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, with secret fire, yeah, I think, again, we can always look to nature for these things that are happening inside of ourselves. And I guess in this class, we focused a lot on dew and the water cycle, how there is this invisible kind of spark of life that is constantly raining down onto the earth and nourishing everything. And then the excess is being exhaled back into the atmosphere and repeating over and over and over and over again.
A distillation process.
A distillation process, exactly. So we spoke about that and, a way to harvest that and use it in our medicine making. But again, it's just it's a mirror image of something that's already happening inside of ourselves, right? We have an experience, like let's say smelling something aromatic. That experience comes down into us. It awakens life inside of us. We grow, and as a result of that unconscious becoming conscious, we then put that out into the world in the way that we've become conscious of it. So we start sharing that with the world. So this energy is exhaled back into the world, and eventually it comes back to us again, and we learn something new. And that cycle just keeps repeating over and over and over again of kind of trading back and forth this secret fire that's inside of everything and making everything go.
Yeah, so secret fire is really fun. And Daniel's Apothecary is called Secret Fire, which I think is a great name.
Thanks.
I like that. That could be very occult too. I like that. Was there any other questions by any of you had? Sky, Judith?
I could just keep going forever. It's better that.
Okay. I think we could wrap it up here, maybe, if you guys are right with that. Around an hour and a half. Yeah. Is there anything that you're kind of like working on right now at the moment? Any like
you?
I'm always working on stuff. I have a new aromatic project that I've been working on. It's mythopoetic, so it's capturing different myths and ways, like archetypes within a smell. So I'm getting ready to launch that, and I've been working on some new classes about scrying with using essential oils and hydrosols. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been interested in. I'm sure I'm always interested in something. So
yeah. New things. Yeah. Ash and I are similar. We're very eclectic and always doing a million things at once. But I've been pretty excited about my new educational platform. Again, it's Lumina Institute. A big focus of that has just been to kind of marry our modern paradigm to the tradition of alchemy and teach it in a holistic way. So there'll be some upcoming classes coming up online with Lumina. So in the fall, we plan on relaunching for the second time our first herbal program, and we're now looking at starting to bring in some more guest teachers, from outside of my teaching, start to bring in some new people on a monthly basis. So I'm excited about that, and some of the research we're doing there too. We're actually trying to take some of these concepts, bring them into the lab and prove them out chemically as well as philosophically.
Nice. That's awesome. Good luck with all this stuff, both of you. Before we wrap it up, I'll let Judith and Sky plug their show, and then when we, after them, I'd like you to promote anything you want. Judith, let everybody know what's up and when they can find all your stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Daniel. This is a wonderful conversation. It could go on for hours, literally. Sky is right. It could go on for hours. But everybody, you could find me on YouTube, X, and on Spreaker as The Loon. Again, I mentioned, please check out me and the Cardinals chat from yesterday and the weekly brunch every Sunday.
Thank you very much, Judith. I really appreciate it when you make it. And Sky, thank you, sir. I appreciate you jumping on, man. Great questions too. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Check out Philosophical Minds podcast and Etherica podcast. And people have probably noticed both of the websites are currently offline, but I'm working on making them fucking incredible. So I'm super excited about it, and we have that to look forward to. So yep, that's that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. And Ash and Daniel, please let everybody know what's up with both your separate stuff.
Well, thanks for having us on. Thanks for giving me a platform to yap at, and all y'all
It was
had
great.
really great questions. Like, really appreciate the thoughtfulness of it all. So you can find me ritualbotanica.com or on Instagram. It's ritual_botanica. And yeah.
You can find me at secret-fire.com, Secret Fire Spagyria on Instagram, or lumina.alchemy on Instagram as well. Yeah, you'll find all my different projects through there. Thank you so much for having us on today, Nick, and thank you, Judith and Sky, for jumping on too with all the great questions. I'm glad we could finally bring our schedules into one place.
Oh yeah.
Time.
We're both very like 4 planets in Pisces, so it's hard to pin us down sometimes, but I'm really glad this happened. This was really fun.
The stars align. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get you on again in the future, both of you, because again, even for me, I'd like to get into the Spagyria and stuff like that. I didn't get to ask any of that stuff. So yeah, there's plenty of more questions. I had tons of them I didn't even ask because I just went off of the conversation. So definitely do this again. Thank you all for coming on. It was really interesting. I appreciate how you got so in depth on a lot of the answers with certain things for the listeners, because I don't think there's a lot of people. I myself don't even know everything that goes on behind this stuff. So I think you really gave a good example for the listeners of the show. So I really appreciate that. And Sky, thank you very much for showing up and jumping on, man. I appreciate it. And Judith, as always appreciate you here. And everybody in the chat, that is what's up. Thank you all for jumping on and listening. That's why we go live. And until the next one, everybody be well later.